Welcome to WAY2B TV, where there's a better way to be than atheist or theist. One of the things I did this week, I spent several hours doing this, but what I wanted to do tonight, because tonight is the very last of the playlist that we're on, and so I don't want to start a new subject until the beginning of the shows for 2016 anyway. But what I did is I went through and I took the Sermon on the Hay and re-edited the version that I have so that it has the ancient text on it. Let me launch the video. I grew up in Tennessee around rural people in a very religious setting. I wondered if a southern farmer raised in the rural church gave up religion altogether, what would he say to his neighbors? And exhaled a burst of air through his nose, as if he had no right to speak. Finally, he began. We could all be content, you know. Folks seem to be the most content when they know nothing at all, especially about spiritual things. Those who can accept this way will be able to find contentment in easy times and in hard times. Those who cannot accept this way will perceive life very differently. For those who are not able to be this way, well, when times are not great, contentment will be tough to find. With these last few words, he was finished speaking. What you've just heard was a parody of the so-named Sermon on the Mount. Could life be so simple? The contiguous line of thought of an ancient speaker reportedly named Jesus appears to say yes. Life is just that simple. Whether the speaker was a historical person or some imagined character in ancient literature, it is this contiguous line of thought that concerns us here. The story of the ancient speaker is not supernatural, but what it teaches about life and about being is still naturally super today. There she is. So what that was is that was kind of a summation of the Sermon on the Mount. It was a parody of it, obviously, and it's something I did, a year ago, about almost a year ago, I guess. In the video last week and this evening, the ancient writer has the ancient speaker finishing up his speech. The ancient speaker brings into question the practice of religion and its supernatural effects. So here's tonight's video concerning the man who built his house upon the sand and the man who built his house upon the rock. In this video, we come to the end of the ancient writer's depiction of the ancient speaker's short speech. In less than 15 minutes, the contiguous line of thought has been revealed. The people of the way did not follow Jesus per se. They followed the way of being Jesus taught. The test of this way is not in a man of 2,000 years ago, but in his principles practiced today. The ancient writer places one of the speaker's metaphors at the end of his speech. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts upon them may be compared to a wise person who built a house upon the rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and burst against that house. And yet it did not fall, for it had been founded upon the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act upon them will be like a foolish person who built a house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and burst against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. The speaker's metaphor is simple. Being in the way brings resilience. Being out of the way renders one fragile. Contentment in life comes from practicing the way, not from believing in Jesus or in any other teacher. One's life may demonstrate both being in and being out of this way. I know mine does. The ancient writer proposed for the speaker a way of being that may be practiced, not a magic way to a supernatural afterlife. In less than 15 minutes, the speaker assured his listeners they could be free of unspeakable religious pretense. This shift to a genuine inward being is the fulfillment of all they heard that the ancients were told. What the speakers seem to propose is not supernatural, but a naturally super way of being content. His listeners learned they could remove religion's load from their own shoulders. No permission or religious observance required. They could find the kingdom of heaven on their own, within themselves, without the religious doorkeepers. The ancient writer reports at the end of the speech the reaction of the crowd. The result was that when the speaker had finished these words, the multitudes were amazed at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one having authority, but not as their religion. The writer tells us the speaker is perceived as one having authority, though the speaker did not speak as religion speaks with authority. The speaker's listeners are amazed. The speaker spoke without the supernatural, yet his way made sense to them, more than their religion made sense to them. I think the natural way of Jesus is still tucked away amongst the supernatural genre of his day. But you cannot make the imaginary real. For millenniums, Christianity has captured its audience via supernatural claims of reward and punishment after one dies. Guilt-ridden religion produced the book, the blood, and the blessed hope. First century Christianity should have resurrected his mind, not his body. In the final analysis, Jesus became nothing more than a stranger every Christian claims to know. I know both atheists and theists with this way about them. You can set them down anywhere. They have nothing to prove. They are comfortable in their own skin. They are genuine. They have no need to rail against anyone or anything, regardless of belief or disbelief. Since entering seminary over 20 years ago, I have been recovering from too much religion. The ancient text is interesting and a very valuable source of insight into the ancient speaker's culture. However, the writers incorporated their own interest, inconsistencies, and religious culture into what they were doing. The ancient speaker's contiguous line of thought is buried in religious practice. Religion is invasive of a healthy life. The speaker taught the way to be, recovering from too much religion. He was not trying to start a new one. Well, Amber, thanks for letting me know that the sound was going up and down. Because I've met both people who proclaim themselves to self-identify as theists, people who self-identify as atheists, who are people who have this way about them. And I experience them in that way in my life. With the conversational bit, we've got Amber and Colleen on the chat room, and we got Carol on Hangouts. And so maybe we can get some conversation going with this. And this is stuff that out of my book, and it's not stuff that we've done videos on yet, but it's stuff out of my book and stuff that will be in the second edition as well in some form or fashion. But the speaker's audience faced millenniums of indoctrination. Today we face that same ancient programming and many added layers of religion besides. You say, I believe I know the absolute truth, but you don't really believe you know the absolute truth if you have to hide. Okay?
If you can't sell it, you don't own it.
I had a most interesting conversation this week at the grocery store. But anyway, he was from Scotland. And so we began talking about this thing, about faith. I said, have you studied? And I said, or is everything you know, have you gotten at church? You've heard it from the pulpit, or you heard it in the Sunday school class or something. But have you sat down and studied the Bible on your own? Have you read opposing views? Have you intelligently thought about this subject yourself? And he wanted to know where he could get my book and how to look it up online and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of this stuff he'd never thought about. We talked about the 5,700 manuscripts and how no two of them are alike, and how there are over 250,000 variances in them. We talked about the fact that the authors are anonymous and they wrote long after Jesus died. And these are all things that really he was not that familiar with. It's amazing because most people, what they know is in their little isolated circle. You see what I mean? And it's in their church group and it's in their family. But as far as having an intelligent discussion about it outside of it, it's a pretty rare thing. And I've got to tell you, I was exactly the same way. Were you not, Joni?
Absolutely.
And so that's the thing. If one's religious beliefs remain durable while seriously considering a multitude of views outside of religion, then maybe you've got something. But if it has to be in isolation, then I think you kind of can understand the answer to that. Change your attitude, and then your visceral response to the world, your actions will not be an issue. But many may see this writing as an attack on your religion. I ask you to keep an open mind. Consider, if you will, if only hypothetically, a brief summation of a religious history, an interpretation of events since the speaker spoke. The story may express what happened to the more durable way to be. In other words, as I like to say, sin was saved. Religion could continue to evaluate missing the mark. But the writers of this material that we call the Bible, the New Testament especially, formed the Christian religion. Okay, it grew out of his legend, not out of his life.
First of all, Jan's on the chat room too.
Okay.
You didn't mention her a while ago. Colleen says, I have no problem with differing religious views, but do with people with people who denigrate others without first learning about them. Amber says, like that lady who smacked the Muslim praying in the California park recently.
Right.
And Colleen says, my grandmother was excommunicated in the 1920s for divorcing and then marrying a Lutheran, so my siblings and I learned early about differences. My grandmother was allowed back into Catholicism after my grandfather passed away, a test by a priest in 1960. He knew the Bible better, so he let her back in. And she said, exactly, Amber, about the lady in California who smacked, is that what she said? Smacked the Muslim praying in the California park.
On 9/11. And I remember where I was when those towers fell down. But the point is that that particular incident doesn't represent all of the Arabic world, for heaven's sakes. What did Jan put there, Joni?
What you said about faith and belief and the grocery guy, isn't faith defined as being convinced that what we believe in isn't true, and belief not necessarily based on proof?
So you have to believe some things by faith. And I said, hang on to that. Hang on to that. Remember that there's nothing wrong with you having faith. Nothing wrong with you having faith. But if you have that faith, understand what it is. It's faith. And so I said just what Jan said. It's faith. Faith is believing in something without evidence and feeling certain that it's true. That's what I said to him. But I also said, but considering the evidence and still having faith means you have faith. But when you won't expose yourself to the evidence, and the only way you can hold faith, it's just what I put in the book, is to isolate yourself in some way, then you don't really have faith because you've not had to be faced with and consider the alternative positions that people take.
And then Amber says, we are an eclectic country and always have been.
Yeah, we are an eclectic country, and I hope we stay that way, and I hope we get more eclectic because the diversity in this country is a beautiful thing.
Colleen says, she's talking about the grocery young man. Only he can define both his views or his beliefs.
This has gone by so fast. Carol, do you have some comments you want to make?
Yeah, I started out being raised in the church and getting all the indoctrination of the Baptist church. And then I went through a period where I absolutely fought against religion and fought against God. And then and then I felt like God had saved me, so I went back to God. But I still was following that list of rules. I kept trying to do all the right things, and I never felt like I quite made it until you came along and introduced the way. Now I no longer believe in a talking snake and things like that, but there's some other things that I'm not sure of, and I will decide on those in time. But I know that the way to be and working that way to be is going to be the most important thing in my life.
Well, I know from talking to you in the past, I don't care if I read the rest of this or not. I know from talking to you in the past that you have at least a strong inclination or a strong feeling that there is some sort of afterlife, whether it be only spiritual or whether it be physical or what it be, but that there is some sort of afterlife and so forth. And again, it's not my place to tear down anything. It's just my show, and I get to talk about what I want to and tell people what I believe and what I think. And I enjoy doing that. But But the point is it's not my place to say that for some reason that you are flawed, or that you aren't smart, or that you're unreasonable, or whatever. That's just not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is I'm saying, I don't believe in the supernatural, and yet I think Jesus was a great teacher. Well, that's a hard row to hoe when you get right down to it, because a lot of people can't handle that. And in those four churches, I can promise you, just what Amber said about this country being eclectic, so was every single church I pastored. It was full of people who believed all kinds of ways. One of the things that I'm proudest of this group that meets here on Sunday, and you're one of them, none of us would say anything or do anything to purposely hurt the other one. We have a pretty open conversation.
Jan says, concerning the grocery guy, it sounds like what you were saying to him was that faith and knowledge are both required for spiritual growth. And before faith, we must understand in whom and in what we have faith.
What did Colleen write there, Joni?
She says, I think growing up military and living all over have given me a more open view of differences without denigrating and seeing more of the similarities. I think as far as you and I are concerned, Elise, we got thrown kind of out of our complacency when we went through our historical stuff, and caused us to be more eclectic and more open-minded and less judgmental of other people.
It's unreasonable to think you have all this knowledge that one day won't change, because most all knowledge will change as you go through life. Things that I believe right now and disbelieve right now are very different. Say what?
The most important thing that you have ever said to me that really took hold was, I know that I don't know, is probably the smartest statement that you can make.
Right.
Because I don't know. All I can do is search.
Right.
But I probably will never know until when I die. Maybe I'll know, maybe I won't.
Well, people who are searching can talk about it.
Yeah.
As long as they'll admit they're searching. People who are searching can talk about it. People who feel like they've arrived cannot. So with that said, anybody got any last words? You got a last word, Carol?
Nope.
No last words? And I don't see anything else on the chat room either. So Jan, I'm going to get down off of my hay and I'm going to get off of here. All right?
See you next year.
Y'all, hey, listen, and y'all have a great Christmas and enjoy your family and friends, and we're gonna take the next 3 Thursdays off, counting New Year's, and then we'll be right back at it, hopefully in a renewed and more energetic way, and so forth. The very first part of January. So here we go to credits.